Hello, and thank you for listening to our next slideshow in the series called Pacing. Today we're going to talk about how pacing and mobility can have a positive effect on chronic pain. Now, you all know this. You probably have all heard it from various different media sources, from your healthcare providers. We all know these reasons why we need to exercise or why we should be exercising. However, for people who have chronic pain, this can be really difficult. Most of you can probably relate to doing some form of activity program or exercise program and basically suffering with it because you end up pushing yourself to a point where you end up in something I like to term the flare-up zone. So we're actually not going to really delve in too much to and talk about too much about exercise. We're going to really focus on movement and mobility in a slow, gentle way. Certainly down the road, maybe once you've built a good foundation of mobility, you can consider getting your heart rate up and get moving enough to get into that sort of exercise range. But we want to start with just a foundation of mobility first. When designing your movement plan, we need to aim to reduce the threat of pain by understanding my hurts aren't harming. What that means is we can do some mobility and activity programs without causing tissue damage. You might be experiencing some discomfort, but that does not indicate that tissues are being damaged with that activity. So it gives us sort of that confidence and safety to know that the activities I'm doing aren't damaging my body. One of the things and planning strategies that we talk about is first really having a good understanding about how the pain system changes and modifies as a result of ongoing signals. Now, hopefully you were able to watch the first video, the orientation video, and that really explains how the body modifies and changes, how the nervous system restructures and changes with ongoing pain. Sort of a little recap on that is that we know when we have that sore body part, that persistent pain, that the body modifies to become more efficient at that process and more sensitive to triggers. And some of those triggers may not be threats to your tissues, but because the pain system has become so sensitive that your body, your pain system is now responding as feeling that it's under threat. So these are like perceived threats. So we use the examples of, having loud sounds or a stressful day. Now, most of you can relate to that, and probably many of you have experienced an increased amount of pain as a result of some of those triggers. But if you think about it, none of those will harm your tissues in your body. So we need to have that awareness and understand that, yes, my pain system has modified and I'm now more sensitive to triggers, but there's a lot of perceived threats that my central nervous system might be responding to that might not be dangerous to my tissues. So that will give you a little more confidence to move. Exploring different ways to move is also very important. So we're talking about moving with a little less intensity and finding ways that you feel confident with that movement. So that might mean reining it in a little bit, doing a little less than maybe you were. If every time you do a mobility program and you end up hurting quite a bit afterwards, then maybe let's try to rein down that intensity and maybe wind back the amount of time or distance that you're doing. So keep in mind, you want to be asking yourself, am I okay to do this? And will I pay for it tomorrow? And those are two really good questions to sort of keep going over and over in your head as you're going through mobility programs and activities. Now, nudging the edges of pain, what that means is kind of checking in. Be sort of aware of your pain system, but don't be too focused on it. So nudging the edges of pain is understanding that, we often talked about the 0 to 10 pain scale, and what we're talking about in this case is trying to stay out of those really high end 8, 9, 10 range where your pain is really flared up. So we want to stay away from that. And what we suggest is that you focus on sort of a time or a distance or some parameter that gets you to stop before your pain starts ramping up significantly. Okay, so what that might look like is if you're out for a walk one day and you're enjoying your walk and your watch goes off and says, that's enough. That's as much as I'm doing today. Hopefully at that point you stop that program and you still should feel like you have a bit of gas in the tank. So stopping before you hit that increased amount of pain. So it might mean doing a little bit less at first and building on that as time goes on. But the idea is that we stop before the pain ramps up. Okay? Staying positive means choose an activity that you enjoy doing, something you look forward to. If you don't like it, chances are you're not going to stick with it. And another problem is every time you force yourself to do that activity, you're probably going to evoke a bit of a stress and anxiety response. And from that first video, you'll remember that we talked about how stress and anxiety actually triggers more fight and flight. So fight and flight tells the brain something's wrong. Again, we go up into those perceived threatening states and the whole pain system becomes more reactive and more sensitive. So it's a really bad loop to get into. So try to choose activities you enjoy and look forward to it ideally. Make plans, stay on track, write it down, put it on a calendar, stick it on the fridge. We're going to talk about that a little bit more detail, but really important so that you can track where you're at and how you can increase. Now, pacing is gradually, slowly, systematically building up to an improved level of functioning. Now, unfortunately, we may not get you back to the level you were at before you had chronic pain, but can we get your level of functioning improved to a point where you can add maybe some of those things that you've avoided for a while now? Maybe you can start to do activities that you really want to get back to and start improving your quality of life. So instead of sprinting through an activity, we're talking about going slow, pacing yourself, going gently through these mobility programs. What activities have you stopped doing since your injury because of pain? So if it was any of these on this slide, then I know why you're listening. But probably many of us have an ongoing list that maybe has gotten longer and longer over time of activities that I tried, didn't go well. Now I can't do it anymore, so I'm going to avoid that activity. So you might have noticed that there are less activities that you're able to do as time goes on. And this sort of feeds into the idea or the theory of waiting it out, waiting until approach. So waiting until the pain goes away before doing activities that cause increased pain are avoided, and the person waits until the pain eases before returning to these activities. Does this sound familiar? You know, I'm going to wait till I have a better day, until I feel up to it, and then I'll start moving, or then I'll go for that walk, or you know, I'll participate in some activity when I feel a bit better. What happens in that time frame though? What happens next? You guessed it. You become less fit and you're more likely to feel the effects of other types of activity. The muscles weaken and they start to be less supportive. And eventually more and more pleasurable activities are lost, causing the person to feel more depressed and socially isolated, right? We usually typically will give up the things we enjoy doing and only do the things we have to do. And our quality of life and our mental health usually suffers as a result of avoiding or not being able to participate in activities we enjoy. So on a graph, it might look something like this. You can see that housework, just as an example here, or activities you like to do, your job, all of that might start to trigger off more pain for you, more suffering. So what do? Well, you avoid them. You stop. You say, I can't do that anymore. And pretty soon there are less and less activities you are able to do before going into those flare-ups. So what activities make you sore but you still do them? It has to be done. It's important. So I'm going to push through it. I'm going to make sure I get this all done. Or you have that one good day and you think I'm just going to go for it and get everything done on the list. Problem is, this isn't the right way to move. This is the crash and burn approach. The person is determined to beat or work through their pain. He or she only stops when the pain becomes severe. What ends up happening then is your recovery time, the time it takes you to get back on your feet. The down days take longer, and the amount of activity it takes to hit your pain level also decreases. So we're pushing ourselves so hard and so far that our pain systems are going into the flare-up zone and they're actually learning pain. So leading to a pattern of overdoing it on good days, followed by periods of increased pain and decreased activity level on your bad days. Over time, those good days become less frequent and your bad days will last longer. So it looks something like this. On a graph, you can see that you have the peak of the hill there. That's basically where you're hitting that flare up. And then you crash down into the lower dip there. And your brain says, wow, that was terrible. I remember that activity. It didn't go well. So the next time you go to do that activity, it's not going to let you get to that point again. It has now developed further protection. It's reacting by trying to protect you harder from that activity by kicking in your pain system sooner. So that the second bump there, you can see it's lower. And that's because, again, the pain system has learned I need to protect you further from this activity because the last time we did it, it went terribly. So you crash again because you probably think in your head, well, I did it this much last time. I should be able to do it the same amount, right? But as you can see, over time, going through these flare-ups just leaves you with lower levels of activity that you're able to do before hitting those flare-ups. So this is not ideal. So crash and burn, waiting it out, both are very normal reactions to pain, and people usually do a bit of both. Unfortunately, though, both of them will have a decreased activity level in the end. So once you've been in pain for a long time, you want to move, you need to move, but you're stuck. You feel stuck in a body with less strength, less endurance, and a lot of fear. You feel trapped, much like a poor old Martha here. You feel like you know all these things you need to get moving, but I'm so afraid of going into another flare-up and suffering again that I might just, wait or not do anything at all. But we know that usually makes things worse. I always remind people that, the opposite of mobility is immobility. And I think many of you can relate that even as you do less, it doesn't mean that your pain gets any better or goes away. And in most cases, it actually gets worse. You all probably know this old story. The point of revisiting this story is to just remind you that we need to be going slow and steady through our mobility programs. We need to stay focused, have a plan, have a direction, not worrying about any other parameters, just sticking to our goals. So in the pacing approach, activity level is increased slowly, systematically with a set plan. So first thing we need to do is decide an activity that you want to do more of. So what activity can you see yourself doing, something you'll enjoy, and something I can do on a regular basis? Now, how often do you think we need to be mobilizing, moving our tissues, moving around, participating in this mobility program? If you said every day, yes, that is right. We need you to be doing some form of mobility every day. Again, remind yourself, this is not exercise at this point. This is gentle, slow mobility that isn't tripping off that flare up. that flare-up response. Okay, so find an activity that is safe for you to do, that you enjoy doing. You can do it in a low intensity, and something that's measurable. We want to be able to measure it so that I can increase it over time or over a certain distance. So the key points to remember are that you need to break that activity, whichever activity you choose, down into smaller steps. So if you compare it to training in sports, no one just goes out and runs a marathon on their first day of training. You want to slowly build up to that distance over time. And the same rules apply for our program. Don't start out at 100%. So we're reining it in. We're doing a little less intensity, and we want to do less distance or time as well. So rule of thumb is to start out at 50% of what made you sore last time, so that you avoid overdoing it. So what this should look like is, if you went for a walk, let's say you did a 30-minute walk, and when you came back home, you were pretty sore. You were probably well into that flare-up zone, and you had to rest afterwards for a period of time to get back on your feet. So obviously we don't want to go there again after learning that flare-ups just really increase the sensitivity of the nervous system and make your pain system and make you suffer more. So instead, after what we might want to try is, after about 15 minutes, let's stop there and see how you feel. So if after 15 minutes you're feeling okay, you're feeling fairly good, then that might be a good starting point for you. But if you're still getting sore after 15 minutes of your walk, maybe you want to even back off that a little bit more. Find a range that at the end of it, remember that point from the beginning, that nudging the edges of pain. Find that range that you can stop and still feel like you have a little bit of gas in the tank. Okay, that I could have kept going a little bit more, but I didn't. I stopped, and now I still feel okay, and I'm not in that flare-up zone. So the key points to remember about pacing is that you focus on the activity, not on your pain system. Don't be 100% pain focused. If you're out there and you're thinking about your pain, you're concentrating on your pain, chances are your pain system is going to ramp up. Also, if you are having a good day, don't do too much. We have those moments where like, I think I could, maybe add on an extra 5 minutes today. No, you'll end up pushing yourself too far and you'll end up hitting your crash and burn. So please stick to your goal, stick to your parameter. What I often tell people is increase, add on 10 to 20 seconds a day. Add on little bits each day to your mobility program, small enough that your body and your pain system barely recognizes the change, but over time you know that you're building up and that you're increasing your level. So just add on small little bits. Use goal setting to figure out how to gradually increasing your program. Write down the goals, share them with others. Make yourself more accountable to keeping that plan. So stick it on the fridge, as I said earlier. Write down that activity that you're doing, the time or distance that you've done that activity, and then increase it little by little each day. So this diagram comes from the book called Explain Pain by Lorimer Moseley and David Butler. They are researchers from Australia, and we use quite a bit of their information to develop our program. So this is one of their diagrams just explaining how pacing and graded exposure to mobility programs can have an effect on the pain system. So at the bottom there, if you just take a look at that dashed line, that's your flare-up zone. And underneath that is a thick red line called your baseline level. So where you're functioning now. Now in the beginning, you can see on the far left that there's not much space between your flare-up zone and your baseline level. But as we go through a mobility program, and if we're able to stay below that flare-up line, you can see that at the end of that, so on the far right, you can see you have a little more space between your flare-up line and your baseline level. And that's what we're going for here. So we're just going to read through this. Starting below the flare-up line, we want to gradually increase your activity, planning steps in advance. Always do more than you did yesterday, but not much more. The flare-up line will slowly lift along with your training level. This is because you are training your brain. You are training the pain system to say that this activity is safe because I haven't pushed it over into that flare-up zone. So we are reducing the perceived threat. Remember, your brain has perceived threats and then creates pain as a result of those threats that maybe aren't necessarily going to be damaging to any body parts. So perceived threat, reducing that threat is really important. So the next notation there is that the protect by pain line will slowly lift, the sensitivity of the system reduces, and really bonus from this is that as you go through and gently increase this over time, your tissues start to get stronger, fitter, and better controlled. So you do start to notice that your body changes, it gets a little bit stronger, you have a little more endurance, and maybe at some point, once you have a good foundation of mobility, you can look at getting into some activity that you might even consider exercise, but not until we have this foundation established first. So work rest cycles. How often should you be taking breaks? Well, the answer is frequently. No breaks versus scheduled breaks. You can see on the left there, no breaks will be a pretty steady loss of energy over time. And the diagram on the right shows that if you take more frequent breaks, that you will have more, you'll sustain that energy throughout the day a bit longer. So you'll have a decreased energy over time, but you will be able to get way more out of the day if you take frequent rest breaks. So why are they so important? What's so important about rest breaks when you have chronic pain? Well, we know that muscular and mental fatigue will decrease your productivity and increases your risk of pain flare-ups. Remember, your brain is now sensitive. The pain system is sensitive and reactive. And if it feels like it's being threatened, if it feels like there's a perceived threat there, it will start ramping up the pain system because it feels like you need more protection. So taking rest can help be a reset for that pain system. What are micro rest breaks? So taking short rest periods scheduled at regular intervals to help maintain energy levels and decrease risk of pain flare-ups. So what I always recommend is, every 15-20 minutes check in, and maybe you need to get up and move if you've been sitting for too long, or maybe if you've been moving, you need to take a little rest break. So just be aware of that. Do a little check-in every 15 or 20 minutes and see where you're at. Recovery time will be longer if your rest periods are taken only once fatigue is set in. It's like that battery. If you drain that battery right down, right empty, then it takes much longer to top it up. So you want to be charging up throughout the day so that you don't have to be recharging from empty. Now, do's and don'ts of breaks. You do need to use those rest breaks effectively. They will help get you through the day with more energy and less pain. Now, keep in mind too, this doesn't mean that you need 30-minute breaks. This might mean 2-minute breaks in your day just to take a breather, reset, do a few movements, stand up or sit down. It doesn't mean that you need to be taking giant, 30 an hour long break every 20 minutes after you've been doing an activity. But what you do need to keep in mind is you don't want to wait till it hurts to take your break. Remember, we're trying to avoid having our body tell us when to take our break or when we've had enough of our mobility program. That's the whole point of this presentation, is we are talking about trying to get ahead of that pain system, trying to prevent it getting into the ramped up state. So we need to stop before we get into the flare-up zone. We need to stop before your body starts aching to take our breaks and to quit our mobility programs. Okay, so that's really the message of today. So your rest breaks can be planning chunks. So as I mentioned, every 15-20 minutes. They can be stretch breaks. Get up and move, stretch out those sensitive tissues, move them around a little bit. Sometimes they need a little reset. Taking some relaxation breaks is really important. in fact, probably should be something that you integrate into your routine every day. So maybe even taking a few breaths and just calming that nervous system down. Again, reminding yourself that stress can fire up that pain system. Going for a brief walk, if you're at work or you've been sitting for too long, or getting up and even just going to the bathroom or getting a drink of water, helps to sort of reset those tissues a bit. Taking those micro pauses, if you can't get out of doing what you're currently doing, then just take a quick stretch break, move around, shift around, take a big deep breath. Switching tasks with different physical or mental demands. Now, if you're doing something cognitive, mix it up with something physical, meaning that you should be integrating that throughout your day rather than doing all of one and then all of the other afterwards, because then you're probably fatiguing both systems. Now, remember to change positions and activities. This goes for people, probably all of us, that like to move in patterns. So loading, unloading the dishwasher and the wash machine, which side do you do that from? And it's probably the same side every time. Or vacuuming, for instance, is an example where we always typically use our dominant hand, and trying to share that load on both sides of the body is important. Same with switching sides and hands. Imagine if you're digging in the garden and you're always using the right side. Try using the left and or your non-dominant side. Balance out some of those demands on the body. Rotate your job duties. What this means is you do not have to finish everything you start. That's right. For people with chronic pain, if we push ourselves to finish every task, then chances are we're going to push straight into that flare-up zone. So, for example, if we need to cut the grass, and I know if I keep cutting the grass for another 10 minutes, it'll be done, but I also know that I'm going to be in a lot of pain. It's probably better if I stop before my pain system starts to ramp up and move on to something else. Take a short break in between tasks and then go do something else that involves a different movement or a different, maybe even a cognitive task that can mix up what I'm demanding of the body throughout the day. Okay, if you're sitting for too long, obviously stand up, move around, and if you've been standing for long periods, the same applies. You need to sit and take a break. So before beginning a new activity or resuming an old one, how will you remember to take your breaks as scheduled? Some people use those fancy watches that go off and tell them to take a break, or you can use a timer on your stove, or we all carry around cell phones these days and they have timers on them as well. Or another thing to consider is where you will take a break. So if you're out for a walk, is there a bench around? Is there somewhere I can sit down? What equipment do you need? So consider maybe taking a pair of shoes to work with you that are good walking shoes, so that maybe you'll get out of the office and go for a short walk, or get out of your house and walk around a little bit. And remember, taking breaks does not mean you're giving up. It means you are planning ahead to gradually, successfully rebuild your activity level again. And that's what pacing is all about. Okay, so keep that in mind. Keep the goal in mind that we are building up so that you can do more, eventually more, but you can't overdo it all in one go. Now, unfortunately, we know that as much as we're going to try to avoid flare-ups, that chances are we're going to have a couple along the way. So what do we do? Well, some of the tips we have here about coping with flare-ups include decreasing your activity rest balance by about 50%. So we want to reduce what you're doing, but don't stop. Keep moving a little bit. People who keep moving have much better outcomes and are able to bounce back better than if you just totally lay out on the couch. Over the next 3 days, try to gradually increase back to your former level. So get back to what you were doing and get back on track. Practice relaxation twice as often. Now remember, when you're in a flare-up, the brain is sending signals to the fight and flight system, and it's saying, warning, we are under threat. And we need to tell the brain that no, we're okay, we're going to be all right. And one of the ways that we need to do that is to tap into breathing and relaxation. So super important. You need to do this and should be doing this on a regular basis anyway. Remind yourself this is temporary. I'm not going to be stuck here. I'm not stuck in this flare up. This isn't my new baseline. I'm going to get back to where I was and get back to my mobility program. Use humor. That will tap into some natural endorphins for you, which are those natural painkillers. So see if you can access those. Eat healthy foods and try to avoid inflammatory foods. They typically may make things worse for you. Avoid negative self-talk. If you get down on yourself, if you get stressed out about being in a flare-up, then again, remember, we don't want to be telling that fight and flight system. We don't want to be adding more fuel to the fire. So nope, stay positive. Try and remind yourself, I'm going to get back to where I was. And I'm going to try and stop when I notice that my thoughts are going down the rabbit hole. Stay engaged, stay occupied. Give yourself a few tasks that you can still do, and we never feel good about a day that is a total wash. So give yourself a few little small tasks, throwing a load of laundry in the wash, or getting some dishes done in the dishwasher, whatever. Just get a few things accomplished. You'll feel much better about the day. Now, breathing is an essential part of our program, and we talk about it in every single one of our courses. It's so important when dealing with the fight and flight response, and we talked about that in the orientation slideshow. Now, we know that changes when people have chronic pain for a long period of time. They typically will start to breathe shorter, quicker breaths, and usually from our upper chest, and that is not ideal. So we've noticed that people change that pattern, and we need to work at changing it back. So what can we do? So we need to work on breathing. We need to consciously be aware of what our patterns are, what muscles are engaging. We need to feel the ribs expand, and I want you to put your hands on the lower ribs, those lower ribs at the bottom, and see if you can get those to engage. You want your belly to be rising as you're inhaling. So when you breathe in, your belly should rise with that, and the lower ribs should be expanding. Now, you need to be working on this 3 to 5 minutes each day. Now, that is a minimum. In fact, it would be better if you worked on this numerous times throughout the day. Now, why? Why do we need to improve? Well, I spoke a little bit about that in the last slide, but there are a few good reasons. Using your diaphragm and improving breath patterns may help settle the nervous system. It stimulates the vagus nerve and tells that brain system that I am okay. And if I'm breathing, taking big, deep breaths, then chances are I'm not in fight and flight. In fact, I can probably go back to that parasympathetic state of rest and digest. Also, another bonus from working on breathing is that you work on improving your spine stability, because your diaphragm is one of your core structures. So by having a toned up, healthy, fit, working diaphragm, that will help you with that core stability, help support those thoracic areas and those low backs that are sore. So you want a strong core stability system, and your diaphragm is one of those muscles. So tone it up by working on breathing, improving your breathing patterns. Decreasing adopted muscle bracing strategies. What do we tend to do when we feel like we're in a threatening situation? Well, we tense up, we brace ourselves, we get ready. And that is not a good place for us to be. That just reinforces fight and flight. And if you'll notice, probably many people, if you poke around in some of those muscles and around your pectorals and your chest, upper chest area, they're probably quite tight and sore, and those are typical muscles that they're tensing up as a result of the perceived threat that's happening in the brain. So we need to let those muscles relax and calm, because we want to tell them that, nope, we're all right and we don't need that stress response. We also want to reduce the muscle fatigue that is in those muscles. So just as I mentioned, the upper chest, neck, and shoulders tend to get a lot of tension because they get recruited to help out with breathing, and it's not really their job. So they get tense and tight, so breathing will help allow that tension to release. So extra important. So this handout should be in on our website and in hopefully the package if you've received one in the mail. But it's on our website if you want to take a look and print it off or just use it as a reference. This is a type of breathing exercise that our physiotherapist has done a lot of research into, and basically it's just reminding you how to engage the right muscles, giving you sort of an idea in your head of which muscles and how to engage them for effective breathing. So I encourage you to look this over and give it a try. Again, minimum of 3 to 5 minutes a day. Now, lastly, we want you to wind down the nervous system. We need you to be aware that tension, anxiety, stressors, all of those things just feed back into that perceived threat that your brain feels like is happening. So it feels like something bad is happening. So we need to ramp up the protective response system. We need to avoid that. So relax the tension in your body. See if you can try to work on the breathing with relaxation. Some of the techniques that we have also on our website include looking at some YouTube videos, body scanning and progressive muscle relaxation. Meditation is also very good for trying to calm the mind and calm the body. So I encourage you to look into that and give those a try. Find activities you like and look forward to. Add that into your day. You should be looking for positive things in each day that bring you joy, put a smile on your face, add some laughter in. There's lots of good research for laughter and pain management. So I encourage you to please keep at it. Now, currently our clinic is closed, but when we do reopen, I do encourage anybody who is able to sign up for our classes. But if not, if the clinic is closed and you're not able to, or you live a distance away, please check out some of the resources that we have available on our website and give them a try. Now, keep in mind, this is work like any other program. You need to be working on this every day and developing and increasing what you can do, and you'll notice that things will change and things will improve. Your breathing will get better. Your the ability to calm that system down will improve, and usually that also can help with things like getting to sleep. So stick with it, take care, and thank you so much for listening. Here's a recap. Should be on the back of the lateral costal breathing handout, but if you need just a point-by-point reminder of what we went through today, here it is. Again, take care.